Hi, I'm Jake, and today we're going to talk about how to start a brand new 9th edition Grey Knights army. If you're new to the channel, what I do here is primarily cover competitive 40k content that I consider myself to be knowledgeable about, and I also produce fully painted battle reports at various competitive levels. And what I mean by competitive is not talking about the most beardy, win-at-all-costs aspect, but rather my interpretation of the most efficient and optimal approach to the game with the interest of winning more matches fair and square. If this kind of content interests you, you can stay up to date by staying subscribed. And if you ever have a suggestion on what content you'd like for me to cover next, please drop me a line. This video is a little bit different than what I intended on producing when I started this channel, since I have yet to have mastered the Grey Knights subject matter. But I thought it would be actually a very fun way to get into a new army alongside other viewers like yourselves who might be in the same boat as me, and I can share my ups and downs during my process in navigating a completely new army build. Most importantly, I figured there's no way in hell that I was the only one overwhelmed by the nuances of which infantry options to build out of the strike squad sets to which weapons loadouts each model should be modeled with. I should mention that this army is definitely an easier barrier to entry, or easier I should say, to getting fully painted up quickly using some techniques. And no, I'm not talking about just spraying it lead belcher and calling it a day, but there's a lot of cool effects you can give your silver armor to add that extra bit of flavor. Since this series is something new that I'm trying out, it may very well call for a segment on how to get your army painted up quick, yet above just that standard battle ready. In regards to what I'm thinking about Grey Knights as an army in general, I feel it will be a highly rewarding army when piloted by more intermediate to advanced players. Reason being is the army is quite elite and unforgiving with a ton of abilities to keep track of between psychic spells, stratagems, and of course, character and relic auras. Movement planning and tactical deep strike choices will also make or break each match is what I'm already foreseeing, but I think in general Grey Knights will be a strong contender in the competitive scene. Basically what I'm saying is this isn't a point-and-click army. You have to interact very carefully in every single phase of the game, including deployment. But what's great is Grey Knights are quite strong in every single phase. Where they absolutely excel is in combat, followed closely, of course, by the psychic phase. Basically, they're the epitome of the psychic police, with an army-wide +1 to deny rather than a +1 to cast, like their Thousand Suns counterparts have. If this is your first dive into 40k in general, I'd expect it to take a little bit longer than average to get the hang of. But once you get there, or if you are already a more experienced player and love the idea of psychic shenanigans followed up with obliterating your opponents using hyper-aggressive melee, this army's for you. So let's kick off this multi-part how-to series and start from square one. Most of you are probably aware, or already aware, that the recent Hexfire box set was released, which included awesome value for Grey Knights and Thousand Suns collectors alike. Interestingly enough, I was really waiting on the Thousand Suns release and have been planning on starting them for my next army for quite some time now, but something about the Nemesis Dread Knights just called to me. Speaking of which, we're going to start there. What to buy from a perspective of starting a viable 2,000 points army. If you can manage to get your hands on 3 or even 4, actually, yeah, 4 is nice, Hexfire sets to either split with a Thousand Suns player, sell off the Chaos side, or even interested in collecting both eventually, this will provide you with tremendous value. From the Grey Knight side alone, each set will only cost you $85, meaning $255 to $340. You've already got a fantastic core to your new army. Let's say you grab 3 of these sets. What that will give you is 3 Nemesis Dread Knights, one of which can be modeled as a Grandmaster, and 30 infantry models, which can be modeled as strike squads, interceptors, purgation squads, or purifiers. Not to mention, this is how you can obtain the amazing new Castle and Crow model, which you should also be able to sell off quite easily if you don't want to hang on to the extras. Considering the infantry boxes alone run $60 on their own, you can definitely see the value of the Hexfire sets already. After this, you'll definitely want to consider which named characters you're interested in including, and from what I see, Caldor Drago himself will be an auto-take in competitive builds. Crow and Voldus are the other named options, of course, but I definitely stand by Drago being the most optimal at the moment. Well, probably always. While 30 infantry models is a great start, I definitely suggest having 40 to 50 on hand so you have some flexibility to experiment with what works for your what works for your army and suits your own personal playstyle. Although that does mean that you'll have to get your hands on another box or two of strike squads, not a big deal. Lastly, I highly suggest grabbing at least one box of Paladins / Terminators, since that box provides both build options. And also, what I'm going to be using that box for is solely for conversions. There are plenty of Grey Knights players who simply use standard Primarius variations, but the Grey Knights aesthetics, in my opinion, is just too cool overall to ignore, so I will be making my conversions. So out of the 5 models you can build from the Paladin kit, I plan to model a Librarian, a Brother Captain, Chaplain, Ancient, and also a Caldor Drago, since I personally cannot stand Finecast. If you want to go to the extra mile on your Dread Knights and plan to run multiples, Pop Goes the Monkey actually has some fantastic bits which you can use to add a lot of personality and really differentiate your Grand Master. Just keep in mind, if you plan to attend any GW events, this may very well be deemed as a non-legal sculpt, but otherwise you should be good to go. And if you have an aversion to that whole baby carrier look, then yeah, those bits are amazing. All right, on to some key points you should keep in mind while getting ready to model your army. Starting with Dread Knights, what you need to know is how difficult they actually are to pose without some hefty clipping and converting. What it really is, it's their arm bars, their socket joints and legs. That's the cause of the difficulty it is to repose. Regardless, they still look great, but if you're anything like me, you'll still want to try to get some flavor across your models. What I did for mine was tilt and pose each knight slightly differently within the confines of the sculpts themselves, and the result was satisfying considering no actual clipping or converting was involved. Naturally, my Grand Master was the model I wanted to differentiate the most, and I was able to pose his arm as far back by just jumping the arm bar out of the inner socket with a slight twist. Hopefully that made sense. The next thing you'll probably, or you are planning on or considering, is actually magnetizing, since there are several weapon variants. The good news is you actually don't have to. If you build your models properly, Dread Knights, the Dread Knight's right-hand socket can easily be swapped out, held by the pressure of the connection bits alone. Same goes for the barrels, which is a major relief. Not to mention, if you plan on doing some fancy techniques with an airbrush to paint your knight's swords, having the flexibility of removing the sword itself will save you a lot of time and hassle of not needing to actually mask off your model while you're painting. I wouldn't worry too much about the arms, guns bits, as the barrels are what differentiates the model loadouts the most, and looks fine either way, honestly. Lastly, rules-wise, there isn't a right or wrong choice from what I'm seeing so far, but if you get your Dread Knights built up properly, you'll have the flexibility, as previously mentioned, to test out and swap out whichever weapons loadouts you'd like while you figure out your list. The route I'm going for myself is all 4 of them, including the Grand Master, loaded up with the swords, side cannons, and the silencers. I may very well play with unique options for each, like swapping out 1 or 2 of the guns for incinerators, but that will be known after I get a few test games in. That's pretty much it for the Nemesis Dread Knight, so let's move on to the Strike Squad boxes. Bear in mind, I haven't optimized his army yet, but I'd say I'm off to a solid start. Out of the 50 models I had to work with, I built the following. 50 models, all with halberds, 8 of them with swords, 6 sergeants with staves, 1 extra model with a stave, 4 falchions, and 2 modeled with side cannons. And lastly, I took the time to actually magnetize 20 of their backpacks in order to have the flexibility of running interceptor squads. Now, I'm sure some of you have also ran into the dilemma of, do I really want to magnetize the weapons loadouts and the arms? It's a pain in the ass. I do not suggest it. My own personal rule of thumb is if a model costs you less than 50 real world dollars, just get more models. It's not worth the headache. The arms actually really suck to deal with in the Grey Knights kits or in the Strike Squad kits. they're just a hassle. I would not suggest it, but magnetizing the jetpacks, seemingly easy. So how did I decide on these loadouts? Well, it took a lot of time to review the data sheets and general army strats and traits several times over at least the first few days since I got the codex to give me the general idea. In today's meta, I feel strength 6 or more weapons are an absolute necessity. This is where halberds come in, and at no extra cost or points cost to the unit. At strength 6, AP 2, and damage 2, they're definitely the most well-rounded. Swords are also fantastic, especially if your local meta isn't fielding a ton of toughness 5 units to chew through, since swords give a -3 AP while still pumping out 2 damage each. Staves are just great to have in general in each squad, just for the extra strength alone. Strength 7 is what it comes down to, but I chose to model my Justicars, sergeants, with staves so I could gain access to the Stave of Supremacy relic if desired, but most importantly the Zone of Warding stratagem access, which would give my strikes or interceptors a 5-up invulnerable save for only 1 CP. Well, 2 CP if the unit contains more than 5 models. This strat alone makes me argue that every squad really should be including 1 stave, just to have that defensive flexibility. Why wouldn't you? Lastly, for melee weapons, some people are intending on fishing for extra 6s using falchions, since they grant an extra attack with each swing. I personally don't see the benefit in massing falchions quite yet. I could be wrong, we shall see. As cool as the model is, being only strength 4 and damage 1 felt like a negative trade-off. However, I'm going to try running 2 of them in 2 strike squads in which I modeled readies to act as a horde clearing squad when needed. The way I see it, if you're fishing for 6s to generate those mortal wounds, for me, it's just not something I'm going to rely on when halberds and swords are just doing 2 damage on their own. So what does this mean now for my 2,000 points list? Well, my intent is to run a Rapier's battalion led by Keldor Drago and a Brother Librarian and possibly a Sword Bearer's Spearhead detachment led by a Grandmaster Dreadknight plus 3 Dreadknights with heavy side cannons, silencers, and swords. Damn, that was a mouthful. Within the battalion, I'm planning on running 4 units of strikes each with halberds and 1 stave, 2 more units of strikes also with 1 stave each, but 2 swords and 2 falchions. Then I have some servitors to fill in my elite slots. For now, I just see them as cheap objective holders or special backline objective holders which can perform actions. I'm not 100% sure on how many and in what configuration quite yet, but it will at least be a unit of 5 for now. For fast attacks, I'll definitely be running a 10-man interceptor squad with 2 staves, 2 silencers, and the rest with halberds. I did want to try the gun loadouts on a 10-man since their Sanctic spell allows them to essentially fire and fade in their psychic phase. And as appealing as the flamers would have been for the extra horde clearing, I felt like the reliability of the silencer output was just better overall. We shall see. Again, this is far from the end-all, but it is my interpretation so far of an optimal modeling loadout. But as small as the Grey Knight's codex, as small as the Grey Knight's model ranges, the codex actually gives a ton of flexibility for various playstyles overall. Since the Dread Knights are what roped me into the army in the first place, the Hexfire sets definitely made going into this direction dollar efficient, which is an awesome bonus. I'll definitely be trying various configurations as I field my new army in the competitive scene, where my alternative concept will be an all-infantry unit. If I take out the Dread Knights completely, that'll free up nearly 800 points. Yeah, just shy of 800 points with my loadouts to run more troops, and arguably Terminators are something I really want to play around with. Maybe a 2x5 configuration. Who knows? We'll definitely dive into list building next, or at least in one of the next videos, so keep an eye out for that, which will discuss various combinations, including unit interactions, traits, relics, warlord traits, spell choices, of course, and also how you should be taking advantage of the tides of the warp. Thank you for following me on this journey, and I hope you guys enjoyed a more raw perspective of something that I really haven't mastered yet. I'd love to hear which direction you're heading with your new army, so feel free to drop a comment so we can all share our different perspectives. Well, that's it for today, folks. Thanks so much for tuning in. And if you found this video to be helpful or informative by any measure and would like to see more content like this, please stay subscribed and join in on the conversation. I'll catch you guys next time. Peace.